"What the hell are you trying to do with those boxes, Gordon?" She noticed. Sally One-Eye noticed everything. "Just trying to get through the damn door," I replied. She jumped up and held the door for me as I struggled with the empty cardboard containers. "Tony fired me. Just needed something to put my stuff in." I started pulling personal folders and papers from my drawers and dumping them into the boxes. I was careful to take only what belonged to me and nothing that belonged to the company. "He can't fire you. The place will fall apart without you." I didn't bother to answer her. Without being asked, she started to help me gather up my things. She noticed when I grabbed the picture of my wife, Laura, off the desk and then threw it into the trash can. Sally One-Eye worked as my secretary for 2 years. I was going to miss her. She had one glass eye that never seemed to fit right. It looked like it had a mind of its own. For some reason, it teared up a lot, so she was constantly wiping it and putting in eye drops. 3 years ago, Sally was in a car wreck. She lost her husband and her right eye. Now she was stuck working in this dank room to support her 2 young sons, Brian, who was 8, and Greg, 2 years younger. "Gordon, what the hell happened? All you did was go home to get another pair of glasses. He can't fire you for that." I was done gathering up the few things I had. I only needed one of the boxes. Tony Monsanto and Laura were in our bed when I got home. They were not doing anything at the time, but they were both naked. "He fired you because you caught him sleeping with your wife?" "Not exactly. First, I told him to get the hell out of my house, and then he fired me." "He didn't leave?" she asked. "Laura and Tony were still in our bed when I left. Tony was laughing as I walked out the door." Sally One-Eye put her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. I smiled and walked out of the building. Monsanto mowers would have to do without Gordon Livingston. I don't think they were worried about it. My brother Shelton wasn't home, but his wife Joyce was more than happy to offer their spare room. Shelton worked an early shift at the tire plant and would be home after noon. Joyce kept me happy with coffee and a warm shoulder to cry on until Shell got there. After a quick lunch, we headed over to my place to get my stuff. Tony was gone, and Laura was sitting in the kitchen with a drink of some type. "What the hell were you doing coming home in the middle of the morning like that, Gordon?" I couldn't believe she asked me such a stupid question. "I was afraid that Tony might run out of condoms. I was just bringing him another dozen," I replied. "Don't be a smart ass. It's not that big a deal, and it's nothing new." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Tony was going to fire you 2 years ago. He agreed to keep you on if I would have intimacy with him. I did it so that you could keep your job." "Are you trying to tell me you have been having intimacy with him for the last 2 years?" Laura looked at me with a slight smirk and finished her drink. "Well, it wasn't all that bad. You got to keep your job and I got to spend time with Tony." "Now that I lost my job, are you going to stop seeing him?" "Don't be silly. Why would I do that?" Laura replied. I couldn't believe what she had just said, but it sure did clarify a lot of things. I looked at Shelton and we both went to the bedroom to pack my stuff. There wasn't much in the house that I wanted, so it didn't take long. Since I wasn't much of a handyman, there were not a lot of tools or power equipment. The last thing I carried out was the desktop computer. Laura sat at the kitchen table the whole time. Somehow her glass got refilled. She didn't say anything else while we were there. Laura was not aging well. She wore her hair long and dyed it a freaky black color. It looked sort of goth or witchy. She had an olive complexion, but her face was thin, making her look hard. Her lips were tight as she stared straight ahead at the opposite wall so that she wouldn't have to meet my gaze. I couldn't tell if she was pissed at me for leaving or for catching her cheating. It didn't matter. Shelton and I stopped and had a quick beer to celebrate the successful completion of the move. It was a pathetic excuse to have a drink in the middle of the day. The house was a rental. Thank God for the little things. It took about an hour to arrange to have all the utilities disconnected. I even got a few deposits back. The bank accounts and credit cards were next. I left half of the savings and checking accounts for Laura. Joyce had a great supper waiting when we got home. Later that night, Shelton helped me get drunk and put me to bed. The hangover was the first one that I had in years. I wasn't counting on any severance pay from Monsanto Mowers, but I had enough from the savings account to last a few months. Unemployment compensation was out of the question, so I would have to look for another job. I decided to start the divorce paperwork first. That took the whole morning. After lunch, I went to the state employment office on the slim chance that they had something. "Hi, Gordon. Fancy meeting you here." Sally One Eye was standing in front of me with a clipboard. "Did you quit?" "No. I was replaced by some big breast and big hair." I just shook my head. That was a mean thing for Tony to do. Sally didn't have anything to do with the whole situation, and it wasn't fair to let her go. "What exactly happened?" "You were replaced with Tony's brother Carmine, and I was replaced with Carmine's girlfriend. I was gone before the end of the day." "Sorry. What can I do to help?" "Can I use you as a reference?" We both got a little chuckle at that. Sally One Eye and I sat together and filled out the mustard-colored employment history forms. I don't think either one of us had any confidence in the system, but we felt like we had to go through the motions. Before we left, I gave her a couple $100 and my phone number. She resisted a little, but finally took it with a meek, "Thank you." A single mom with 2 young boys and no job was going to have it rough. I spent the next week trying to find someplace in the area that might be interested in hiring me, but had no luck. After getting a scathing phone call from Laura concerning the disconnected utilities, I changed my cell phone number. Simmons Farm Equipment was about 3 miles outside of town. Most of the farms in the area had been sold off to developers. Ranch houses dotted the landscape where corn used to grow. Everything about the place indicated that it was past its prime. It needed paint and new signs. The parking lot was in worse shape than the buildings. Even the windows needed washing. As dismal as it was my last chance. Earl Simmons was well over 60 and quite overweight. He sat behind his desk like Santa Claus with no beard. I was dressed for an interview, so he knew right off the bat that I wasn't interested in buying any farm equipment. "If you're not buying, you must be selling. I am not interested." "I can't argue with that. I was just looking for a free cup of coffee." My flip answer was rewarded with a hard laugh as he pointed to the coffee urn in the corner. I sat down across from my host and lifted my styrofoam cup like a mock toast and nodded. "Thanks. It's a pleasant end to a bad week." Earl Simmons gave me a quizzical look. "Don't I know you? You're that living good fellow who works for Monsanto. Am I right?" "Livingston. I used to work at Monsanto. I'm not working anywhere right now." After a short pause, "I never did like that Monsanto guy, or his brother." We both sat there for a few moments, neither one of us saying anything, just enjoying the coffee. "Are you sure I can't sell you a harvester? I can give you a good deal on last year's model." There was a twinkle in his eye. Maybe he was Santa Claus. I found myself looking around the room. Outside the window, I could see a large warehouse and a larger storage yard. There seemed to be an absence of merchandise. The showroom was totally empty. I assumed he let the inventory die down because of the slow sales. I didn't know a damn thing about farm machinery, but something didn't seem right. I was brought out of my reverie by his booming voice. "You look like you are thinking of buying the place. Are you going to make me an offer?" "In my dreams." Simmons leaned back in his chair and smiled. 7 or 8 years ago, Monsanto's operation was crap. He didn't start making it until he hired you. Is that right?" He was right, but there was no way I would admit to it. I knew what I did for Tony, and apparently other people noticed also. All I could do was smile as I tossed my empty cup into the trash container. I was still smiling as I got up to leave. "Don't rush off, Mr. Livingood. We might be able to work something out." Livingston. Gordon Livingston. 2 hours later, Earl Simmons and myself had come to an agreement. He had some big plans, but needed somebody like me to make them work. He was a thrifty man, so money was no object. I was willing and able to help him with one stipulation: I could hire my own assistant. Sally One-Eye was going to be a happy woman. I took Shelton and Joyce to the Red Lobster that night. The misery that Laura had caused was disappearing fast. I think Sally was happier than I was after I called her. When we got back to the house, Laura was waiting for me. She spent 20 minutes trying to convince me to come back to our place. It appeared that Tony was not very excited about supporting his wife, family, and Laura. I politely listened to her complete argument, smiled, and walked into the house. I did not say a word. The next few weeks were busy. The main building was all concrete block. The second floor was a 3-bedroom apartment that had been used as storage for the last 20 years. Earl was more than happy to let me use it to live rent-free. Sally One-Eye helped me find a stove, refrigerator, and washing machine. Sally and I cleaned and painted the inside of the office and the apartment. I hired a couple of high school kids to paint all the outbuildings. Earl never squawked about the cost. It was a lot of fun, but eventually we had to start doing productive work. Laura called Joyce and told her she got the divorce papers and signed them. It was pretty cut and dry since we didn't own the house and had no kids. I had already given her half of the assets, not much for 12 years of marriage, but all she deserved. Sally One-Eye was a skinny little thing with bad teeth and a fake eye. Her hair was dirty blonde, and it appeared that she had never been in a beauty salon in her life. She definitely lacked makeup skills. She always appeared to be clean, but needed some serious maintenance. All this was compensated for by a telephone voice that dripped honey and a work ethic that put me to shame. Her computer skills were extraordinary, as well as her accounting ability. To me, she was a dream come true. One nice thing about working for a guy who thinks he's smarter than everyone else is that he usually isn't. Monsanto Mowers had no confidentiality clauses or proprietary agreements. Tony didn't need any of that crap because he was the man. Unfortunately for Tony, that also meant that Sally and I had an open playing field. Sally sent letters to all the wholesalers that we had dealings with and all the retailers that we worked with. All she did was explain that the two of us were no longer with Monsanto Mowers and were not available to provide service to them any longer. She was very careful not to solicit any type of business. In the meantime, I was calling all of Earl's contacts to see if any of them were still viable. Most of the accounts had died a slow death over the years, and some of them actually went out of business. As far as Earl was concerned, the farm equipment operation was dead. He had no desire to resurrect it. I fell across a Korean manufacturer who was trying to get U.S. distributors for gang mowers. They weren't very sophisticated, but sturdy and cheap. It was an ideal item for small municipalities and school districts to consider. After 30 minutes on the phone, I had 50 units coming from California on a consignment basis. We had the room to stock them, and it cost us no money up front. They sent a box of sales brochures by Overnight Express, and Sally One-Eye was right on it. We had 6 orders before the first load arrived. The next week, Sally started calling each of the letter recipients. I don't know who was happier to hear from her, the wholesalers or the retailers. All she was doing was laying the groundwork, and she was good at it. We were looking to enter the residential lawn care market, but had no problem with branching out a little. Several rototiller companies had tried to get Tony to carry their lines, but he wanted no part of it. I had 3 of them lined up by the end of the first week. 2 of them were willing to work on consignment. The showroom on the first floor was ready for some products. I didn't think it would be gardening equipment, but Earl was thrilled. Sally One-Eye surprised me by signing up 2 chainsaw manufacturers. An old friend of Earl's came around with a truckload of new chipper shredders. He was fine with the consignment arrangement also. In no time at all, Earl had a stock of new merchandise to offer. Monday morning, Earl introduced me to our new salesman. He was a retired guy and was willing to work solely on commission. He said if he didn't sell anything, he didn't want to get paid. He sold 3 gang mowers and a chipper on his first day. Things were getting better. Sally One-Eye was so busy that she asked if she could come in to work on Saturday. It was okay with me since I would be here anyhow. There was no school or daycare over the weekend, so she had to bring the boys to work with her. I always liked kids. They spent most of the day in the apartment watching TV, but I think the part they liked best was going out back with Earl to spot groundhogs. Sally said they talked about it all the way home. A few weeks later, Sally's boys were out of school for the summer. She brought them to work with her every day. Earl kept them busy most of the time out back. The business was located on the front part of Earl's old family farm, an orchard actually. The hillside was peppered with old apple trees, most of them dead or dying. I put a set of bunk beds in one of the extra rooms for the boys. Just in case, I got a twin for the other room. It was not hard to convince Sally and the boys to start staying overnight. Since the nearby elementary school was highly rated, I had no trouble at all getting Sally to move into the apartment before the new school year. Come to think of it, I think it was her idea. How did she do that? For making the offer, I was rewarded with a small kiss. Things were looking up. Somehow or other, Tony found out where I was working. Carmine's girlfriend had been using the company computer to download porn and got a couple of nice viruses. Tony asked if I could come by and get the system up and running again. I think he could hear me laughing as I hung up the phone. He was lucky that I didn't sue him for alienation of affection or improper dismissal. Earl had been carrying company medical coverage for years, even when he really had no employees. When Sally found out that she now had dental coverage, she was ecstatic. One afternoon a week, she started spending time at the dentist's office. Nothing was apparent at first, but as the weeks passed, she started to look better and better. The big change came when Earl got her an appointment with an ocularist. Her problem all along had been an ill-fitted prosthesis. Once she was fitted with the right size, it was almost impossible to notice. Sally One Eye had now become just simply Sally. For her birthday, Earl and I gave her an all-day beauty treatment at an Elizabeth Arden salon. I had to drive her to Philly to have it done. The boys and I got to spend the afternoon at the zoo, while their mother was completely pampered. It was a good time. Laura called and asked for help. Her car was being repossessed and her cell phone service was canceled for non-payment. She moved into a furnished studio apartment, and she was already behind on the rent. I left her all the furniture from the house. I have no idea what she did with it. Tony refused her phone calls, and she wasn't allowed in the company building. I tried my best to be polite and understanding, but explained that there was no way that I could help her. She didn't like the answer, but had no alternatives. There was one more week to go until the divorce would be final. I was counting the days. We were hoping that the business would start moving because of the retailers, but it turned out to be the other way around. Tornado Mowers was the first manufacturer to contact us. There were 9 retailers in the area dealing through Monsanto Mowers. They were unhappy and wanted a change. 6 of them knew of our new operation and recommended that Tornado contact us. By the end of the day, we were the official wholesale distributors of Tornado Mowers for the Tri-County area. We got our first real break. The next day, my divorce was final. Things started to fall together after that. One by one, the wholesalers and retailers that used to go to Monsanto Mowers were coming over to us. Sally got to hire a girl to help in the office. A few weeks later, I happened to hear a noise out by the equipment lot. 2 men got out of a pickup and were removing something from the truck bed. After a few moments, 2 Molotov cocktails were flying across the lot. The pair of arsonists waited until the fireballs erupted and then raced back to the truck. They were too late. Before they reached the truck, there were 2 shotgun blasts and the front tires of their truck went flat as pancakes. I turned on the outside floodlights and Earl was standing there laughing. 2 shadows were running down the road fast as hell. The police had no trouble locating the owner of the truck. He couldn't wait to spill the beans on the Monsanto brothers, who paid him to do the job. That was pretty much the end of Monsanto Mowers. What little customer base they had left switched over to us within the week. Tony ended up doing some jail time, but I don't know how much. Carmine disappeared. The damage to the lot was superficial and was also covered by insurance. Earl strutted around like a peacock, elated to see his old business flourishing again. Every now and then he would come up with a suggestion, but he was always careful not to interfere. We now had a lot of superintendents, who also doubled as a Spanish interpreter when necessary. One of our mechanics was a local trade school graduate, and the other was an old fart. They complemented each other perfectly. Sally became a payroll and tax expert in no time. Shelton and Joyce came out to see us about once a month. It was never anything fancy, but it was nice to get together with someone. Earl lost his wife over 10 years ago. They never had any children. He was always welcomed when we had company. Laura seemed to have disappeared. After Sally moved in, we became closer. At first, we would just sit and watch TV after the boys went to bed. On occasion, we both would fall asleep on the sofa and wake up cuddled together. We started giving each other kisses, as if saying thank you for some little favor. Before I knew it, I was giving her a peck on the cheek when she and the boys left to go shopping or something like that. At the beginning of December, Sally told me that it was time for Brian to have his own room. I agreed, of course. That afternoon, she moved all of her things into my room. I should have seen that coming. After the boys were in bed, she took my hand and led me to the bedroom. I was embarrassed at being such a dense cloud and thrilled that she took control. The day before Christmas, the local justice of the peace quietly married us. We didn't tell anyone, but Earl saw the ring on Shelley's finger the next day. It was a good holiday. The business flourished. When spring came, Earl announced that he was leaving for Florida. He had a sister living near Ocala who had been nagging him for years to come down. I was afraid that his move would create a few problems. But Earl had that under control. He deeded the property and the business to Sally and myself. All we had to do was send him 10% of the monthly gross until he kicked the bucket. It was an offer we couldn't refuse. He didn't need the 10% because he had accumulated a nice nest egg over the years. It was more like a symbolic gesture, so that we would always remember him. It wasn't necessary, but we understood. The farmhouse gave us a lot more room than the apartment. It took a full month to get everything repainted before we could move in. I never understood what Earl had against painting. The week we finally moved in, Sally found out she was pregnant. Brian and Greg were as excited as I was. It was hard to imagine that a short while ago my life was in shambles. It's funny how things work out. I hope the new baby has 2 eyes. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I knew Sarah was cheating the moment I saw her reflection in the hotel lobby mirror. She didn't notice me. She was too engrossed in Derek's lips against her neck, his hands possessively clutching her waist as they waited for the elevator. My wife of 8 years and my business partner of 5, hidden in plain sight, thinking they were safe in a hotel 15 miles from our office. I stood frozen, briefcase in hand, the contracts I'd stayed up all night preparing suddenly meaningless. I'd come to surprise Derek with our completed bid for the Morrison account, the biggest opportunity our firm had ever seen. Instead, I received the most devastating surprise of my life. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside, laughing. As the doors closed, Sarah reached up and kissed him deeply, with a passion I hadn't seen from her in years. I didn't confront them. I didn't make a scene. I simply turned around and walked out, the image of their betrayal seared into my mind like a brand. That was 6 months ago. Today, I'm finally ready to collect what I'm owed. Sarah and I met in graduate school, both of us ambitious and driven. I was immediately captivated by her quick mind and infectious laugh. She was studying marketing while I focused on business development. We complemented each other perfectly. She understood people, and I understood systems. After graduation, we married and built our life together. When I decided to start my own consulting firm, Sarah was my biggest supporter. She stayed up late with me planning the business model, critiquing my proposals, even designing our first logo. We were a team in every sense of the word. 3 years in, when we needed to expand, Sarah suggested bringing in Derek Mitchell. He had a reputation for being brilliant at client acquisition, and we needed someone with his charisma and connections. I trusted Sarah's judgment implicitly. Derek became not just my business partner, but one of my closest friends, or so I thought. The first few years were magical. Our business, MSB Consulting, grew rapidly. Derek brought in high-profile clients while I handled strategy and operations. Sarah managed our marketing and brand presence. We were the perfect trio, our combined talents creating something greater than any of us could have built alone. Looking back, I can see the warning signs. The way Derek's eyes lingered on Sarah during meetings. How she began dressing differently when she knew he would be at the office. The inside jokes they shared that somehow always excluded me. But I was too consumed with growing our business to notice the growing distance between Sarah and me. "You're working too much, Michael," she would say, her tone more accusatory than concerned. "Maybe you should take a page from Derek's book. He knows how to balance work and play." I'd brush off her comments, assuming she was just frustrated with my long hours. I was working for us, for our future. I never imagined she was building a different future altogether. The small betrayals accumulated slowly. Sarah began critiquing me constantly. My clothes, my conversational skills, my business decisions. Nothing I did seemed good enough anymore. Meanwhile, Derek could do no wrong in her eyes. "Derek thinks we should pursue the international market," she'd say over dinner, not bothering to look up from her phone. "I've explained why that's premature," I'd respond, trying to keep the irritation from my voice. "We need to solidify our domestic base first." "Well, Derek says that's playing it safe. He says visionaries take risks." It was always Derek says, or Derek thinks. My opinion, despite having built this company from nothing, suddenly carried less weight than his. Then came the unexplained absences, late meetings that couldn't be rescheduled, weekend conferences I wasn't invited to attend, the growing coldness in our bed. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that all marriages go through periods of distance. But the day I saw them at the hotel confirmed what my subconscious had been screaming for months. My wife and my business partner had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. That night, I sat alone in my home office, a glass of whiskey in my hand, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I would be patient. I would plan. I would make them pay for their betrayal in ways they couldn't imagine. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had changed. I greeted Sarah with a kiss on the cheek, listened to her talk about her plans for the day, and headed to the office where I shook Derek's hand and discussed client strategies. But behind my facade of normalcy, I began gathering information. I installed monitoring software on our home computer and Sarah's work laptop. I recorded their phone conversations. I hired a private investigator to document their meetings. What I discovered was far worse than I had imagined. Not only were they having an affair, but they were actively plotting to push me out of my own company. Derek had been cultivating relationships with our board members, suggesting that my conservative approach was holding the company back. Sarah had been working behind the scenes, preparing marketing materials for a rebranded company, one that conspicuously omitted my name. The most damning evidence came in the form of emails discussing their post-Michael strategy. They had already consulted with a lawyer about forcing a buyout at a fraction of my shares' worth. They planned to use my long hours and emotional distance as grounds for divorce, with Sarah claiming she deserved half the company for her contributions. Their arrogance was breathtaking. They assumed I was too absorbed in my work to notice their machinations. They underestimated me, and that would be their downfall. My breaking point came during a dinner at our home. Sarah had invited Derek over to discuss business, something that had become increasingly common. I watched from across the table as they exchanged knowing glances, their fingers brushing when passing dishes, the subtle intimacy of betrayal happening right in front of me. "You seem distracted, Michael," Sarah said, her tone condescending. "Derek and I were discussing the Westfield proposal. He thinks we should take a more aggressive approach." Derek nodded, wearing the expression of benevolent concern he had perfected. "No offense, Michael, but your caution might cost us this account. Sometimes you need to take risks to get ahead." "Like sleeping with your business partner's wife?" The words almost escaped my lips, but I held back. Not yet. The time wasn't right. Instead, I smiled tightly. "I appreciate your input, Derek. I'll consider it." Later that night, as Sarah slept beside me, or pretended to, I realized with crystal clarity that this couldn't continue. I would not be the passive victim of their betrayal. I would not allow them to steal what I had built through years of sacrifice and hard work. I would act, but not with the hot rage they might expect. No, my revenge would be cold, calculated, and complete. My plan required patience above all else. I needed to appear oblivious while positioning my pieces on the board. The first step was to secure my company. I began having private meetings with our major clients, strengthening my personal relationships with them. I emphasized how my direct involvement had benefited their businesses, subtly separating my contributions from Derek's flashier but less substantial work. With our board members, I took a different approach. I shared my vision for the company's future, a vision that highlighted innovation while emphasizing financial stability. I made myself indispensable by spearheading a new service line that quickly became our most profitable division. Simultaneously, I created a paper trail documenting Derek's increasingly erratic business decisions. I didn't need to fabricate anything. His arrogance had led to several questionable calls that I had previously covered for. Now, I simply stopped hiding his mistakes. On the home front, I played the role of the oblivious, devoted husband. I sent Sarah flowers, planned date nights, and told her how much I appreciated her, all while documenting her lies, her absences, and her increasingly brazen disrespect. "You're being unusually romantic," she commented one evening, looking almost guilty as she received the expensive bracelet I'd bought her, the purchase recorded and added to my evidence file. "I just realized I've been taking you for granted," I replied, watching her discomfort grow. "I want to make sure you know how much you mean to me." The irony was exquisite. Every act of affection was another twist of the knife I was preparing to plunge. The most delicate part of my plan involved the company's finances. Derek had been skimming from certain accounts, likely to fund the lavish lifestyle he used to impress Sarah. I had discovered his embezzlement months ago, but had said nothing. Now, I carefully documented every instance, creating an airtight case that would be impossible to defend against. I also discovered that Derek had been cutting corners on our regulatory compliance, particularly with the Morrison account, our biggest client. He'd falsified certain certifications to expedite the process, putting the entire company at risk. Rather than correcting his mistakes, I documented them, knowing they would be valuable ammunition. As for Sarah, I made sure to document her role in all of this. Her knowledge of Derek's financial improprieties, her complicity in his schemes, and most damning of all, her use of company resources to plan their future together at my expense. By the time 3 months had passed, I had assembled a comprehensive dossier of their betrayal, personal and professional. But I still wasn't ready to strike. Timing would be everything. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Derek, growing increasingly confident in his position, proposed a company restructuring that would effectively dilute my authority while expanding his role. He presented it during a board meeting, with Sarah enthusiastically supporting his proposal. "This restructuring will position us for the growth we've been discussing," he said smoothly, glancing at Sarah with barely concealed intimacy. "Michael's strengths are in operations, but we need visionary leadership to take us to the next level." Several board members nodded, clearly having been primed for this moment. I could see the trap closing around me. If I opposed the restructuring, I would appear resistant to growth. If I accepted it, I would be surrendering control of my own company. I smiled, appearing thoughtful. "You've clearly put a lot of work into this proposal, Derek. I'd like to review it in detail before we make any decisions. Perhaps we could reconvene next week?" Derek couldn't hide his disappointment at the delay, but he had no reasonable grounds to object. "Of course. Take your time." That week became the most intense of my professional life. I worked day and night, calling in favors, finalizing evidence, and preparing for what would come next. The night before the follow-up board meeting, Sarah tried to extract information from me. "Have you finished reviewing Derek's proposal?" she asked, attempting to sound casual as she slipped into bed beside me. "I have," I replied simply. "And?" Her voice held an edge of anxiety. I turned to her, my face neutral. "And I think tomorrow will be very interesting." She studied me for a moment, perhaps sensing something in my tone. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Good. The boardroom was tense the next morning. Derek sat confidently at the table, Sarah beside him, not even trying to hide their alliance anymore. The board members filed in, along with our company lawyer, whom I had specifically requested to attend. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "Before we discuss Derek's restructuring proposal, there are some matters I need to bring to the board's attention." Derek's smile faltered slightly. "Perhaps we should stick to the agenda, Michael. We're here to discuss the restructuring." "This is relevant to any restructuring decisions," I replied evenly, then turned to our lawyer. "Could you please distribute the documents?" The lawyer handed each board member a sealed folder. I watched their faces as they opened the files and began reading. Shock, disbelief, disgust. "What is this?" Derek demanded, his face flushing as he scanned the contents of his folder. "Evidence," I said simply. "Evidence of financial impropriety, regulatory violations, and breach of fiduciary duty." "This is absurd!" Derek slammed his hand on the table. "This is a character assassination attempt because you're threatened by my proposal." I remained calm. "The evidence speaks for itself. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers from client accounts. Falsified compliance documents for the Morrison project. Emails discussing how to systematically undermine my position in the company I founded." The board members looked at Derek with growing horror. His charisma couldn't erase the black and white evidence in front of them. "And Sarah?" I continued, turning to my wife, whose face had drained of all color. "Would you like to explain to the board how company resources were used to facilitate your affair with Derek? Or perhaps you'd prefer to explain your role in the plan to force me out of my own company?" "Michael, She couldn't finish, the weight of exposure crushing her practiced composure. I turned back to the board. "I've also taken the liberty of speaking with our major clients. They've all indicated that their relationships are with me personally, not with the company as an entity. If Derek's restructuring goes forward, they will take their business elsewhere." The room was silent. Derek's restructuring proposal lay forgotten on the table, his grand plan in ruins. "Given these circumstances," I continued, "I propose an alternative restructuring. Derek will resign from the company, effective immediately, with no severance and no references. The board will appoint an independent investigator to determine if criminal charges are warranted regarding the financial discrepancies." I paused, looking directly at Sarah. "As for our marketing director, I'll be handling that personnel decision privately." The vote was unanimous. Derek was out, stripped of his position, his reputation, and his future in our industry. As security escorted him from the building, the look of disbelief on his face was the first installment of my revenge. Sarah tried to approach me after the meeting, tears streaming down her face. "Michael, please, let me explain." "Save it for your lawyer," I interrupted coldly. "You'll be hearing from mine." The personal reckoning came later that evening. I arrived home to find Sarah waiting, her eyes red from crying, desperation written across her face. "Michael, we need to talk," she began, her voice breaking. "What happened today? I know how it looks, but it's not." "Not what?" I interrupted, my voice eerily calm. "Not an affair with my business partner? Not a conspiracy to steal my company? Not a complete betrayal of our marriage and the trust I placed in you?" "I made a mistake," she whispered. "We can work through this." I laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Sarah. What you did was a calculated betrayal that went on for months. You didn't just cheat on me. You tried to destroy me." "That's not true. Derek was the one who—" "Stop!" My voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "I have the emails, Sarah. I have the recordings. I know exactly what you said about me, what you planned, how you laughed at my obliviousness while plotting to take everything I've built." Her face crumpled as she realized the extent of my knowledge. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to ensure that you and Derek will never recover from this." I walked to my office and returned with a thick folder, which I dropped on the coffee table between us. "Divorce papers," I explained as she stared at the document. "You'll note there's no proposed settlement included. That's because you'll be getting nothing." "You can't do that," she protested, panic rising in her voice. "I'm entitled to half of everything. The house, the savings, my share of the company." "Your prenuptial agreement waives your rights in cases of infidelity," I reminded her. "And as for your share of the company, the board has unanimously agreed to terminate your employment for ethical violations. Your company shares will be returned to the company treasury as stipulated in the shareholder agreement you signed." Her face paled as the reality of her situation began to sink in. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice small. "That's not my concern anymore," I replied. "You have until tomorrow to pack your personal belongings. Anything you leave behind will be donated or disposed of." "Tomorrow?" "That's impossible. I need time to—" "You had time, Sarah. You had 8 years of my time, my trust, and my love. You wasted it. Now your time is up." I turned to leave the room, but her desperate voice stopped me. "I loved you once, Michael. I really did." I looked back at her, this woman I had once built my life around, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction at her distress. "The feeling was mutual," I replied. "But unlike you, when I commit to something, I see it through, including this divorce." The aftermath unfolded exactly as I had planned. Derek, facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement, fled the country, abandoning Sarah to face the consequences alone. His hasty departure only confirmed his guilt in everyone's eyes. Sarah tried to fight the divorce terms, but her case collapsed when her lawyer heard the recordings I had gathered. She left with nothing but her personal belongings and the crushing weight of her actions. The company not only survived, but thrived without them. I promoted Claire, my loyal assistant, who had secretly helped gather evidence against Derek, to Chief Operations Officer. Together, we restructured the firm, focusing on ethical business practices and client relationships built on trust. As for Sarah, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had been forced to move to a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, taking a low-level marketing job at a struggling company, the only place that would hire her after word of her professional and personal betrayals spread through our industry. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an email from her. "Michael, I understand now what I threw away. The life we built, the trust you placed in me, I destroyed it all for something that wasn't real. Derek abandoned me the moment things got difficult. He never loved me the way you did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the magnitude of my mistake, and I'll be paying for it for the rest of my life. Sarah. I read the email once, then deleted it without replying. Her regrets meant nothing to me now. 1 year later, I stood in my expanded office, looking out over the city skyline. The company had doubled in size, with Claire proving to be a better partner than Derek ever was. Honest, dedicated, and loyal. My phone buzzed with a message from my real estate agent confirming the sale of our former home, the last tangible reminder of my life with Sarah. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as I typed my approval. Later that evening, Claire and I celebrated the company's most successful quarter with a quiet dinner. As we clinked glasses, she studied my face. "You seem different lately," she observed. "More at peace." I considered her words. I am. For a long time, I was consumed by what Sarah and Derek did, the betrayal, the revenge, all of it. But now, I realized that the best revenge wasn't exposing them or taking everything back. No? Claire raised an eyebrow. Number. The best revenge is moving forward and building something better than what was destroyed. They're trapped in the consequences of their actions, while I'm free to create a new future. As we continued our dinner, discussing plans for the company's expansion, I realized I had achieved something that Sarah and Derek never could. Success built on integrity, partnerships founded on trust, and a life defined by my own terms, not by the betrayals of others. The game they started, I had finished. And I had won not just by destroying their plans, but by refusing to let their betrayal define me. In the end, that was the most satisfying victory of all. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.